Welcome everyone to this webinar. This is on Canada-EU Science, Tech and Innovation Opportunities. Bonjour tous et toutes, bienvenue à ce webinaire sur les opportunités de STI avec l'Union européenne. Ce webinaire se déroulera principalement en anglais, mais nous vous encourageons à nous contacter dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Please note all are welcome to ask their questions in French or in English via the chat feature, which will be public to all. My colleague Edouard, sitting right by me, will be curating the chat. The top questions and themes will be compiled and addressed at the end of the presentation. So who am I? My name is Aslan. I'm the head of Science and Tech for Canada's mission to the EU, here now in Brussels. I'm also part of Canada's Trade Commissioner Service. Our mandate includes helping Canadians succeed in markets around the world. At my core, I'm a trade professional who tries to make every effort to connect Canadians to real opportunities and or help with qualified contacts. So the following webinar is a culmination of many meetings, research, and exchanges over the last 18 months, distilled into succinct, clear points that compile all concrete EU STI opportunities that are open to Canadians that I've come across and will now happily share with all of you. I've also invited experts of respective programs who speak directly to their subject matter. So again, the overall goal is to share these real opportunities to you, the Canadian innovators, to help increase international collaboration in STI, to build on partnerships and have more successes for Canadians. At the end of the presentation, we'll be asking you to complete a short survey, just 7 questions, multiple choice, and that'll help us determine how best we could help you going forward. So there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in and go to the next slide. So in short, we will be covering the following: a history and summary of Canada's collaboration with the EU in STI, EU programs that are open to Canadians with a strong focus on Horizon Europe and Eureka, different funding programs that can support Canadians' STI efforts in the EU and international markets, and then the known networks, support systems, and tools that are available to you in your activities. Next, please. So the EU is Canada's second most important trading partner after the US and a science and tech and innovation priority partner for Canada. We share a strong and successful history of STI cooperation, and both parties are interested in further enhancing bilateral cooperation. Investing in research and innovation is a key priority area for the EU, which aligns with Canada's own STI policy. Our shared history starts back with a 1959 agreement, continues through a 1996 Canada-EU agreement for scientific and technological cooperation. Its purpose is to encourage and facilitate cooperation in fields of common interest, supporting research and development activities to advance science and or technology relevant to those fields of interest. One recent example is the 16th meeting of the EU-Canada Joint Science and Tech Cooperation Committee, which was held in Brussels last October. We had strong representation from key Canadian government departments that came to work with our counterparts here in Brussels, focused on research and innovation. Priority themes included AI, quantum, smart cities, bioeconomy, aerospace, oceans, Arctic research, and researcher mobility. So, to underscore that this really is a solid, open, collaborative relationship with like-minded allies and partners with shared values, I now happily invite from the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation, DGRTD's Head of Unit, International Cooperation Policy, the incomparable Mr. Martin Penny, to say a few words on EU-Canada cooperation and how both parties are open to doing more. Martin?
Thanks very much, Aslan. That was quite an introduction. If I could go to the next slide, please. So first of all, as Aslan said, we have a great story already in our cooperation. but there's such strong potential for us to do much more. If you go on to the next slide, in the EU, our overall strategy for cooperation in international research and innovation, the global approach to research and innovation has openness at its core. And that's really the key focus of this webinar today. There are funding opportunities for every single researcher and every single research institute that has joined us today in the webinar. And I think that's a message which we need to get out clearly to you. There are opportunities for all of you, and we strongly encourage you to apply and to work with European researchers in providing solutions to problems which will affect our societies, our health, our environment, our economies, and so on. Go on to the next slide. As Aslin said, we have a long and successful history of cooperation, and there's really so many opportunities for us to do so much more. We've highlighted areas where there's good cooperation, but you are the experts in your field. Don't be blinded by where we say these are areas of cooperation. If you are a researcher, I don't know, in nanotechnology, not included here, if you're a researcher looking at high performance computing and its application in climate modeling, there are opportunities for you in every single area of research, from going from the hard engineering through to the social sciences and humanities. Equally, Canada has made it very easy for you in that there is co-funding available for you through a national program, the NFRF, which I'm sure we will talk about later in the seminar as well. Our openness is such that we're actually open and discussing with Canada to do more with you through an even closer relationship through association to the program. And this is something which negotiations are going on right now. However, already there are many opportunities for you. There'll be more in the future, but don't wait for the future. We want you to apply right now. If we go to the next slide, we try and make things as easy for you as possible. So it shouldn't be that calls for proposals come as a surprise. We want to make sure that you're well prepared for them. So in the way in which we set up our programs in the European Union, we have our legal basis for the program, the Framework Program Regulation of Horizon Europe. But we set out already through the strategic plans, which will be the top priorities, which will come for the calls for proposals first. So you can see the strategic plans, which parts of the Horizon Europe regulation will be implemented first. They are then distilled down into what we call work programs. You see currently the ones for 23 and 24 are already published. And you see there are 642 topics or 642 separate calls in different areas of research. These are the top-down research opportunities that are available for you already. The vast majority of these are fully open to cooperation with Canada. We do restrict in a very small number of areas, but actually it's 9 of those 642 topics which would not be open to Canada, which are restricted to the European Union. So many opportunities for you, and very pleased to speak to you today, and I hope we see more Canadian applications to our calls. Aslin, back to you.
Thank you very much, Martin. So with that, as we mentioned before, the audience for this webinar is you, the Canadian innovators, like researchers, faculty, and SMEs. So the focus is going to be on what programs are open to you, as well as what works well for cooperation. So again, this will be a high-level overview of all opportunities, and we'll start with the project calls. So within research, as research and innovation is a key priority area for the EU, there are a number of established programs that promote and encourage international cooperation, not the least of which are the EU's and the world's largest research programs. So as Martin mentioned, you have Horizon Europe, which has the top-down approach. And then you have Eureka, which is the bottom-up approach supporting SMEs. Canada has been and continues to be a very active participant in both these programs. Then there's funding. So for funding, there are certain EU programs that provide direct funding to Canadians, whether Canada is a member of a program like Eureka or not, like the European Research Council. For certain programs, Canadians will need to bring their own funding to the table. And that said, there are a number of programs that Canadians can avail of, and we'll provide more concrete examples later. And then the last big component are the networks. We can all agree that the more diverse and open the collaboration, the greater the result. The main ways Canadians can achieve success in co-innovating with the EU is through partnering, like networks, consortiums, knowing who to work with, collaborate with. then getting funding to support your efforts, and then finally knowing what project calls of interest are available and coming up and how best to pursue them. The EU promotes cooperation through consortiums with member states, associated countries, and third parties. So case in point, for most Horizon Europe Pillar 2 projects, consortiums, so groups and networks, must include a minimum of 3 participants from EU member states or associated countries, with at least 1 EU member state. For interest, for some of the countries that are listed as part of an associated member would be Israel, Norway, Iceland, and Turkey. So there are also networks to whom interested applicants can reach out to for, say, support with the application process, funding options, partnering activities, tools and resources, or even just a heads up of programs that might be coming up. So with all the queries I get on Horizon Europe, without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Next slide, please. Horizon Europe. So again, the EU and the world's largest research and innovation funding program. Like imagine a budget of over 95 billion euros with a B for a program of 2021 to 2027, commonly referred to as the current framework program. Up to 35% of the budget is dedicated to climate change mitigation and clean tech solutions. As was clear with what Martin is saying and what we're trying to underscore, Horizon Europe is open to Canada. And Canadians have actively participated in past European research and innovation framework programs as a non-associated international partner since the first program, which started in 1984. For the last program, Horizon 2020, Canada was the third most active non-European partner behind US and China, and we ranked second out of the same group in terms of the budget share received. We accounted for close to 10% of application of those grants, with a success rate of 18.07% compared to the average of 17%. Horizon Europe is in 3 pillars, which we'll get to further into the webinar. And Canadian participation was predominantly in Pillar 1 at 59% and at 36% for Pillar 2. Predominantly, it was 10% for profit organizations and the balance researchers and academics. So as some of you may already be aware, and what Martin had mentioned, Canada is currently in negotiations on closer cooperation under the Horizon Europe Framework Program. Canada and other global actors are encouraged to associate, which is a type of membership, under Pillar 2, and updates on this can be shared solely once all has concluded, likely later this year. So for interested Canadian participants, to explain the main difference between associated and non-associated member, and bear in mind, I'm making this as a massive oversimplification, but for the individuals applying to the program, it's really a difference of having direct or indirect access to funding and possibly and not always having the chance to lead on the project calls. But this will be more clear later in the presentation. So if we could go to the next one, we're going to go into Pillar 1. So the big one for Pillar 1 is researcher mobility, but I'll quickly cover the other 2 first. So we have research grants. The European Research Council is the premier European funding organization for excellent frontier research. It offers long-term grants in Europe to scientists of any nationality in any field. Canadians are encouraged to apply to ERC's yearly calls for synergy grants. These are ones that support bold scientific challenges in any field of research. Research must be carried out in an EU member state or associate country, and you'd have a group of 2 to maximum 4 principal investigators working together to bring different skills and resources to tackle ambitious research problems. Synergy grants can be up to a maximum of 10 million euros for a period of 6 years, or pro rata if it's a shorter duration. Next, research infrastructures. These are integrated, oh no, sorry, pardon me. Yeah, These are integrated, interconnected, world-class research infrastructures set up to address major scientific and societal challenges. They support the development, upgrading, and consolidation of excellent pan-European research infrastructures, while optimizing their use to address major scientific and social challenges. They are open and accessible to the best researchers from Europe and beyond. And in Horizon 2020, Canadians were granted funds from Pillar 1, examples being an international network for terrestrial research and monitoring in the Arctic. The last point on this slide is researcher mobility, also known as the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Actions. It supports doctoral and postdoctoral training through mobility across borders and exposure to different sectors and disciplines. It provides grants for all stages of researchers' careers and encourages transnational, intersectoral, and interdisciplinary mobility, regardless of the research domain. It enables research-focused organizations to host talented foreign researchers and to create strategic partnerships with leading institutions worldwide. Its focus is on excellent research. This is fully bottom-up and again open to any field of research and innovation, from basic research up to market take-up and innovation services. This program is supported and co-funded by MyTax, a not-for-profit that promotes Canadian innovation through research and mobility programs. So with that, I now welcome the great Mathilde Prieux, MyTax International Partnerships Officer, to provide a more in-depth view of this program. Mathilde?
Thank you, Aslin. So I'll quickly present MyTax. So MyTax is a not-for-profit organization based in Canada. We're funded by the federal government and the provinces, and we work through research internships. And so we do offer additional funding to the MSCA Staff Exchange Program to really incite Canadian participation into European funded projects. The balance of mobility between Canada and the EU is quite equilibrated. However, we do want to promote growing collaborations between transatlantic collaborations between Canada and European countries. We also have additional programs that I think we can present a little later. So maybe next slide, please. So like as I mentioned, the Staff Exchange collaboration is a co-funding arrangement with MSCA. We provide matching funds to support Canadian participation in the projects. We really seek to promote talent development all the way to market-ready technology and commercialization as well. So the idea is to really support structural long-term partnerships for doctoral and postdoctoral researcher to collaborate together. Next slide, please. There's some examples of, here's an example of collaborations that was supported, but there are many others. There's over 200 participations of Canadians in MSCA projects. So we have many examples, but this one is in general under the SDGs. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. That's for now. I'll pass it to you until next intervention. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Merci infiniment, Mathilde. So with this, I'm just going to jump to Pillar 3 before going into Pillar 2, because we're going to do a deeper dive into Pillar 2. And so in short, Pillar 3, Innovative Europe, aims to grow Europe's innovation ecosystem. The two programs that I'm aware of that are open to Canadians are the Pathfinder and Accelerator programs. And I seem to, yeah, okay. Yes, pardon me. So EIC's Pathfinder program, it's open to Canadian participation, and it supports cutting-edge, early-stage research projects that have the potential to create genuine scientific breakthroughs. Canadians can participate as part of a consortia in which there are at least 3 EU or associated country partners, and with at least 1 EU partner present. Canadian entities as such are not eligible for EU funding, except if it is specifically stated otherwise, or if their participation is considered essential for implementing the action. Next, please. As for the accelerator, this is more to support SMEs, including startups, to carry out innovative projects that are ready to scale up. So this is more the TRL 6 to 9. A Canadian innovator can apply if selected for funding, though. They will have to relocate her or his company in any eligible country, which will be a member state or associated country, before the signature of the grant agreement, which is about 3 to 4 months before the results are known. So we'll go to the next slide. And now we are in the crux of it all, Pillar 2, global challenges. This is known as global challenges and European industrial competitiveness. But imagine, it accounts for over 50% of the overall Horizon Europe budget, and it is the one pillar offered for associate membership to Canada. There are a total of 6 clusters with an emphasis on digital, climate, food, and health. Past Canadian participation was predominantly in health at 13%, followed by climate, transport, and food. Funding is another story, as we'll get into a little bit later. But for now, the key points to note is that there is direct funding from the EC if and only if what is presented by a Canadian is proven to be truly unique. And this will be assessed on a case-by-case basis. For certain Pillar 2 project calls, then there could be support through Canada's Horizon Global Platform Fund or other funding programs offered by both the federal and the provinces to be delved into later. Next slide, please. So just for a quick visual, I know the order seems off, but I did it based on budgets. And so these are a total of the 6. In the interest of time, we'll keep moving. Next slide, please. As for the clusters, this may not be super clear, but for the different project calls that are coming up for this, like everything comes out into your blocks. So this one is for 23-2024. There are 141 projects that are open for international cooperation, where 51 of them are for food, 38 for climate, and 22 for digital. Next, please. This is something that we could provide more information with follow-up documents, but the short of it is that there's a way to go through the system to get detailed information of what are the project calls coming up, what are the criteria, the eligibility, what kind of action it would be, so on and so forth. So then you're able to plan ahead and not always be surprised like when something is open just on the spot. The main thing to remember now is that to search for and apply for a project, you could go to the Search, Funding, and Tenders tab, where you could then search for related project calls based on themes, and then have a snapshot view of each call. So the one thing to note when you're looking at the project calls is to see if under type of action, there is something that's written as RIA or Research and Innovation Action. If so, that could mean that a Canadian could be eligible for a particular type of funding known as NFRF Horizon Global Platform. But for before we get into that, because that part of the funding will be addressed a little bit later, to have greater insights though on how to pursue project calls within clusters, I'm very happy to give the floor now to Canadian Institutes of Health Research Strategic Partnerships and International Relations Advisor, the very experienced Danielle Saint-Jean, who is also Canada's national contact point for health project calls. Danielle?
Morning, afternoon. I am very pleased to be here, part of this discussion. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So I just want to make sure, I'm sure everybody know who the Canadian Institute of Health Research is, but we're the federal funding agency for health research. On the left of this slide, we have our mandate, and on the right, CHR is composed of 13 institutes. The key point for today is really, as part of our mission, we really want to foster effective Canadian involvement with international health research that benefit Canadians and the global community. Next slide. This slide really demonstrates our cooperation with the European Commission. We've been part of many partnerships to date, 30, And presently there's 8 that are active that some continue to launch calls. For example, JPIMR, EGP Rare Disease, TransCan, they look to launch annual calls. And as Canadians, if Canada CHR decides to participate, then there's funding available for the Canadian component of the team. Through these partnerships, we've invested so far 62 million to support the Canadian component in 223 transnational teams, which means we've leveraged for Canadian researchers 230 million when working with other countries. So for the next calls, they're usually launched in December and January, and then we get to decide on an annual basis if we're in or not. And as you may know, there's lots of benefits to participating in these, right? They're ambiguous research innovation projects. They tackle global challenges, mobility to Europe, there's research funding. Next slide. So this one is really to focus on Pillar 2, Cluster 1, health, which is, like Aslin was saying, which is all about improving health and well-being through prevention and innovative technologies, making healthcare accessible and sustainable. This one is supported by 8.25 billion euros, and it's really a cluster that has 6 activities, which is on the left of the slide. In addition, one of the key mechanisms for achieving the clusters will be a series of European partnerships, which is the bottom left. I've included a few European partnerships that are in development where different countries can look to become members, and these will also start to launch joint calls. Another key mechanism through these is really the EU missions. There's 5 in total, which a few have a health research component. Really, these missions are set to be bold and inspirational and attain clear objective within a time frame. So, and then all these 3 components have clear intersection between the clusters, mission, and some partnership to incorporate the health agenda. Next slide. So there's really 3 ways for Canadians to participate in these projects, right? Beneficiary means you're receiving money directly from the European Commission under Horizon Europe. Associated partner, right? You're bringing your own funding to the project from a Canadian source. Affiliated entities means you're connected to somebody in Europe that's getting money that could be sent to you as a subcontractor or in different ways. For Canada, 1 and 3 are really exceptions and need to be justified, but it's possible in theory to be done. To receive funding from the European Commission, Canadians are only eligible for support if they request funding in the application. It's really important to remember to do it at the beginning. It can be added later. I know in Canada, sometimes we can change as it goes through, but with the European Commission, it must be included right from the beginning. And then the peer review has to deem that it's essential. So basically you have to demonstrate, right, that without Canadians' help, you couldn't attain the objective. Nobody in Europe can do that part, and that's making it essential. I think, and then for the second one where you're bringing your own funding, there's sources in Canada, but for CHR, the major one is really the CHR project grant program and our priority announcements. And then of course, when we participate in joint transnational calls. Next slide. Here's a slide about national contact points, which is a system put in place by the Commission. And then there's different national contact points in all countries in different areas. I'm the national contact point for health. Basically, so researchers can come to me with questions about the framework program, if they're looking for partners in other countries, just how to go about it. We're happy to answer that. Under Horizon Europe, we continue to do that service. Okay, thanks. Aslin?
Perfect. So now that we've covered the project calls in Pillar 2 and the process, as alluded to before, the last big piece is funding. So launched in 2018, we have Canada's new Frontiers in Research Fund, also known as NFRF, that funds interdisciplinary, high risk, high reward, transformative research led by Canadian researchers working with Canadian and international partners. And within their international stream, there's the 2022 Horizon Global Platform Competition, which could fund certain project calls within Pillar 2. So without further ado, I'm pleased to have the New Frontiers in Research Fund Manager, the very responsive Emma Fieldhouse, present what this program entails. Emma?
Thank you, Aslan. So as was mentioned, NFRF is a federal research funding program. We're under the direction of the Canada Research Coordinating Committee, and we're administered on behalf of all 3 of the federal funding agencies through the Tri-Institute Program Secretariat. And yes, we currently have the 2022 Horizon Global Platform Competition open, which will provide support for Canadian researchers who are partners on successful projects funded through research and innovation action calls under Pillar 2 with a deadline before September 30th, 2023. So just to note, this is extra funding for the Canadian portion. The Horizon Europe grant itself has to be a successful grant in order to be eligible to apply for this top up from NFRF. So researchers who are interested in applying, they submit a registration to NFRF a week after the Horizon Europe deadline has passed to say, yes, we've applied to the Horizon Europe competition. And then you don't submit a full application to NFRF until the results of that Horizon Europe competition have been communicated to the team, and you know that you've been successful or that the grant that the application that you were part of as a Canadian researcher has been successful. Next slide, please. So to be eligible to apply, the Canadian researchers must be an integral part of the larger Horizon Europe team. And so that means that either the researcher themselves or their institution has to be a signing partner on the consortium agreement for the Horizon Europe project. Next slide, please. And so we have funding either per project, or if there's more than one eligible Canadian researcher on an application, each of you could make a separate application to NFRF and potentially be eligible for funding. So it would be up to the team to decide what would make more sense. In order to be eligible, the nominated principal investigator making the application to NFRF and or their co-PIs must be considered independent researchers at their primary affiliation, which must be a Canadian institution that holds full eligibility with one of the tri-agencies. So generally speaking, those are post-secondary institutions, either universities or colleges, or some of the research hospitals. But each of the tri-agencies has a list on their website of institutions with full eligibility that we would encourage you to check. And next slide, please. And so the NFRF funding that's available is up to $200,000 per year for up to 2 years. At this point, most likely only 1 year of funding is available because we would expect that the competition's been running for a while now already. And so for calls that have a deadline after January 1st, 2023, we only have 1 year of funding available. And applicants may, in addition, request up to 25% of the value of the direct costs to cover indirect costs. So that means in total, we have up to $250,000 per year available for the Canadian portion of the research. And back over to you, Aslan.
Thank you. So next slide, please. So if for whatever reason, for what you're looking at, it's not the NFRF program that could work, don't despair. What we did is that here in Brussels, we consulted and consolidated a federal and provincial funding guide for Canadians interested in STI opportunities across the world. The document details more than 26 federal and provincial programs that total about 3 billion Canadian dollars that could support STI projects in Canada and internationally, including but not limited to Horizon Europe. And their target sectors, eligibility criteria, funding amounts, information, links on how to apply, contact points and everything. Just for a visual, we did just a mini little snapshot of just the health programs that are there, so you have an understanding of what the summary page looks like. So it's like a 3-page grid at the start of the document, and then once you see which one you want to go further into, then you look in the table of contents and then dig in deeper. Next, please. So we've covered funding within Horizon Europe Now let's talk about the networks. So sometimes we say you need to join a consortia, so on and so forth, but what if you don't know where to start? So we've asked around, and so we're sharing with you some of the 6 known STI networks that you can avail of. The first one being the Enterprise Europe Network. So this is the world's largest support network for SMEs and innovation stakeholders. It's created and owned by the European Commission. It operates a publicly opened online database for business opportunities, information exchange, and matchmaking with over 4,000 company profiles from over 60 countries. Within that, we have the European Canadian Centre for Innovation and Research, ECCIR. And so the ECCIR coordinates the Enterprise Europe Network Canada services and supports companies with expert advice and strategically designed templates to help create, upload, and promote their company profiles through the database. So they're the ones that do the hand-holding, walk you through it, and then ensure that you're able to effectively promote yourself within this database. You then have EURAXESS, an official initiative of the European Commission. The EURAXESS North America promotes transatlantic research collaboration, highlighting opportunities for European funding to Canadian researchers, as well as further connecting Canadian research institutions to Europe. You could subscribe to their bi-monthly flash note emails for info on Horizon Europe, as well as upcoming events, news, and funding information. They also have a jobs portal, which lists research jobs throughout Europe. And in parallel, they run, and this is of interest, a hosting portal where MSCA, so this is the Marie Curie Actions Program, and ERC applicants can search for host institutions. Added bonus, EURAXESS can also offer guidance for Canadians with regards to Horizon Europe Pillar 2 by connecting them with Europe-based NCPs when needed. Next slide, please. You then have cost actions. In short, COST is the European Cooperation in Science and Tech, which is an EU-funded intergovernmental framework with 40 member countries accessible through an online platform. In short, researchers can submit a proposal for a cost action for EU funding or join an ongoing cost action. The cost actions are based on the researcher's own interests and ideas and allows one to create a network in which researchers, innovators, and industry specialists based in Europe and beyond collaborate in any fields of science, from frontier to applied research. So Canadians have been active participants in COST. From 2014 to 2021, 1/3 of running actions had partners from Canada. Most collaboration was in engineering and technology, then medical and health sciences, followed by social sciences and natural sciences. Interested Canadians can apply to be a partner for new cost actions or can join preparatory teams submitting new proposed project calls for possible collaboration. And you could register at their e-cost for consideration. You then have NGI Enrichers, and basically this, and I'm going to be a bit more quick now, it would support European researchers and innovators to spend 3 to 6 months in Canada or the US, but I'm going to talk about Canada, to work and collaborate with Canadian hosts to promote knowledge sharing and establish long-term collaborations. NGI, by the way, is Next Generation Internet. So, and this may be more for the interest for the heads or points of contacts for the universities and the research institutions. If this is something that you wish to do, let us know. And MyTax, from their perspective, are helping with the researcher mobility part of it. And then last but not least on this list is the TCS, which is what I'm a part of. So that's Canada's Trade Commissioner Service, where we offer help for international development through networks, funding, and support. For the purpose of this, here we could help Canadian clients prep for international business, share global opportunities, which is what I'm doing right now, and help you find and possibly even connect with qualified contacts. This could include connecting heads of universities and research institutes with targeted EU counterparts and/or potential partners. And so now for the other significant EU STI program, EUREKA, which is the world's biggest intergovernmental network for supporting international industry-led R&D projects, I'm very happy to give the floor to NRC IRAP's Industrial Technology Advisor, the most supportive, Eric Holdrinet. Eric?
Thank you, Aslan. Next slide, please. So my home is the Industrial Research Assistance Program of the National Research Council of Canada, and soon to form the core of the new Canadian Innovation Corporation. If you've seen the news, we help essentially small and medium-sized enterprises. I say essentially because we also provide connections and advice for larger firms and for universities and research centers to participate in Eureka projects. So we do provide connections. We organize partnership development activities, so missions abroad, to help find new partners or confirm partnerships. We do those connections, and we like to link small SMEs into the global value chains. And we do provide funding, so that's why most of them come to us first. Next slide, please. Eureka, as mentioned by Aslan, is a premier program to support industry-led research. So not industry exclusive, but industry-led. The projects have to be looking at going to the market within a reasonable time frame after the end of the project. So here it says market-oriented R&D projects. So there's research and development projects. The platform itself is a collaboration between a set of countries. There's about 47 member countries currently. It's all of Europe, really, not just the EU. It's also Switzerland, the UK. It's everybody except, I think, the Vatican and Andorra. And Canada is part of that. We joined as an associate member in 2012, and last year we became a full member. So we graduated, very happy about that. It's all those countries in Europe plus a half dozen outside Europe that are members of Eureka. That includes South Korea. We have lots of projects with them. Singapore is the newest, very interesting. And also Chile, Argentina, and South Africa. So it is a network of countries, but also of national funding authorities. So funding does not come from Eureka. It's not centralized funding. It's decentralized. And in each country, there would be a national funding authority that would support its own national participants according to national rules. And I mentioned I come from IRAP, and so funding reserved for Eureka project in Canada comes from IRAP and can thus only go to our targets for funding, which are SMEs, but that's up to 500 employees, which is twice the range of the definition in the EU for an SME. So it's quite a wide range for businesses. The aim of the program is to help set up those projects, evaluate them, but also synchronize funding between countries that support their own participant. And that's a key point, because it's very important for the participants to be in sync and start their activities in a timely manner. Next slide, please. There are three main project types within Eureka. The Eureka Network project types is really a flexible tool to help countries set together a call, so a bilateral call or a national call or a multilateral thematic calls. But by default, Eureka projects are bottom up. And so it's the participants that choose the subject. It is not Eureka imposing themes. It is really the participants, and it can be in all sectors that are civilian. It excludes military, but apart from that, anything goes in terms of market target for the project and technology for which the project is aimed at. So there might be under Eureka Network occasional calls. We have currently a call Canada Eureka Network, so it can be with partners from any Eureka country. It is closing very soon, however, but we expect to have one at least yearly and maybe twice a year. We're really ramping up that one. We currently have a call in lightweighting technology. So lightweighting, anything that makes components lighter. It, of course, targets transport and aerospace, but it can also be in medical devices and construction. And it is with a wide set of countries that have very significant manufacturing technologies research in the private sector. We also have currently a Canada-Israel call. Israel is part of Eureka. So it's, I mentioned Europe, but also it includes Turkey and Israel as part of that set. And next slide. EURAXESS project is like Eureka Network in project type, but the mechanism and the process is different. It's still typically 2-3 participants. It can include SMEs, large firm universities, but each country will fund their own. What's interesting with EURAXESS is that there's at least 30 countries that have pre-reserved funding for EURAXESS projects, and there are regular calls twice a year in the spring and in the fall, so it's almost continuous. And the funding is always grant type. So in Canada, IRAP funding is grant type always, but in Europe, it varies country to country normally, except for EURAXESS, and that makes it a favorite. It's sometimes not only the best game in town, in some countries, it's the only game in town for SMEs wanting to do international projects with grant type funding. The program is fast, and the next deadline to apply is the 13th of April. That's too soon for those who would just see that now, but there's a next deadline in September, so you have time to set up your team and get advice and coaching. Next slide, please. The third instrument is the cluster. So the Eureka clusters are in specific verticals: software, electronics, telecom, advanced manufacturing, and low carbon energy. Those are for large pre-competitive projects with 5, 15, 20 participants, typically with a multinational at the center, several universities and SMEs from 2, 3, 4 countries. The funding varies country to country, so that's like Eureka Network. In Canada, we do fund those projects. Of course, IRAP funds SMEs with grant type, and there's no a priori ceiling to our funding. It's the standard IRAP process that's underneath that. Evaluation is done by the clusters, but then the participants, when the project is labeled, they come back to us and say, okay, I've got part of a cluster project, a Eureka. Usually we've been in contact with them for a long time then, and we put in place standard IRAP funding. So again, it's not Eureka funds in Canada, it's IRAP standard funding contract. The clusters have typically a call every year. It starts in the fall, and there's a really interesting event set up by the software cluster called ITEA every September. It's a proposers day that assembles the deciders. So head of firms, head of research at some large firms as well, university participants who are used to working with the private sector are there. So in your intelligent software domain, it's really a great place to go. Next slide, please. So again, I said anybody can participate in a Eureka project. With Canada, we've had projects where the counterparts in Europe have been, half of them were SMEs, but we've had partners that were large firms and universities. So really, it's varied. Next slide. And I believe it's the last slide. So who do we fund? I mentioned that IRAP can only fund small and medium-sized enterprises that are incorporated, profit-oriented. And we do have a preference for international projects for scale-up. So if you're a pure startup, we have other programs to support you. But if you were in a growth phase, you have, say, at least 15 employees and all that. That's our target as an investor in those projects. If you're not an SME, can you get funding? Can you get support? You will get support because you might have other benefits deriving from participating in those projects. But you have to declare to be self-funded to start. You could be a contractor for an IRAP-funded SME. You could receive funds from other programs, but then you have to show that, or to show that you have the authorization and that you have the funding to engage in the project when we evaluate it. And the link with Horizon Europe, there is a link. I mentioned EURAXESS program. The EURAXESS program is actually co-funded for EU participants by Horizon Europe. So there's a link here between the two programs. But in Canada, funding for that is from NRC by default for SMEs. That's it, I think.
Perfect. Merci, Eric. So in the interest of time, we're going to cover the next ones very quickly. In short, there's other fundings that could help you. You could freeze frame this later. For these two, this is with the Trade Commissioner Service that could called CanExpert. You have innovation and SMEs. One offers up to 75,000 Canadian, another one up to 50,000 Canadian to help you pursue your goals. And as I've mentioned before, there's going to be links and documents that could give you the details on this. With that, my text covers a few programs. If Mathilde, you could cover it in just about a minute or so. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So MyTax, besides the collaboration with MSCA, has its own program to support innovation and innovators from the future generation of researchers to help startup launch globally, or SMEs with their talents and research and development needs. So I'll start with the MyTax Entrepreneur International programs that provides travel grants for startups to explore foreign markets. It's up to 5,000 Canadian dollars. It's renewable 5 times. All disciplines are eligible under MyTax programs, and we work with 25 countries and regions, but all of the EU countries are eligible. So that's our startup support program. Next slide, please. We also work with to support industrial research collaborations between Canadian and international organizations. So the model is a 4 to 6 months internship. We provide a 15,000 Canadian dollars award that's co-funded between MyTax and the industry partner. That industry partner can be Canadian, it can be a foreign organization as well. The idea is really bridging that gap between academia and industry to really provide knowledge and talent transfer. Again, open to all discipline, project 20 sites. It's a really flexible model. The idea is really to provide a support. So it's the success rates for applications are quite high. I think it's around 97%. And we have a team of business development leads at the Canadian universities that help SMEs and companies find the right talent, phrase their project proposal in a way that ensures success and make sure that they access the support and the talent and the funding that they need. So that's our Accelerate program. It works domestically as well, but it is declined at the international level. So Accelerate International. Thank you. Next slide, please. We also support talent development at an earlier stage through talent development program. Global Research Internship provides mobility to Canada for European senior undergraduates to come in and undertake research in a world-class lab in the summer. It provides them training. It helps connecting researchers and universities as well. So this program is purely academic collaborations. So it's slightly different than the other two I've mentioned. But it's quite an important program as well. We've hosted over 2,000 students from abroad in Canada last summer, and we're looking at growing that number every year as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, for purely academic collaborations as well, and that's the program we use for the MSCA program as a top-up. It's academic research collaborations. It's a bilateral program. It's 12 to 24 weeks between universities and research labs to collaborate on all disciplines. And it covers from senior undergraduates all the way to postdoctoral fellows can receive this award. We do offer and organize a thematic call to support some priorities in key sectors that we have in common with our partner countries. Those can be advanced computing, quantum and AI, health, scientific and social innovation, which is seeks to promote pluridisciplinary collaborations, bridging, STEMs with social sciences, etc. And then finally, clean technology. So again, this program is the one we link up with the MSCA, but it also works on its own as a standalone program as well. Thank you. Next slide, please.
So we could just skip to the next one. That was my Cliff Notes summary, and go to the next slide, please. So we're coming to the end of the presentation. Ultimately, the big takeaway is that there are many STI opportunities for Canadians in or with the EU that you could avail of, and there is support. So just for what we do here at Mission, I mean, we've done a number of tools. You could do a screenshot later, but not the least of which is the Horizon Europe Guide that we've done for Canadians and the STI funding programs that we've collected, stuff on IP, cybersecurity, and data protection. Next slide, please. Another thing you could freeze frame is that the key contacts for those that are presented and share the information. Here are some of the email addresses that you can use in contact. And the very last slide is that the main thing is that we try to encourage all of you to reach out to us. Know that there is a network out there. Know that we are personally invested in your intended success, and that there's more that we could do. So I strongly encourage everybody to go do the survey. There's a QR code, and we'll try to address some of the last questions that came in. And for all those, and it's really, it doesn't even take a minute. It's a drop down with multiple choice, and basically it's going to tell us what project calls, programs, or partnerships you've pursued that are of interest that you might pursue, and or what themes or topics that you want us to further delve into for future activities. This is then what guides our activities. And then for all those, and I'm being very cheeky here, for all those that follow the survey and submit their email address, then we're going to be sending all support documents with hyperlinks and everything else that's going to wrap up with the webinar. And of course, the recorded version of the webinar. So you have every tool at your fingertips to ensure great success in STI with the EU. And with that, I will stop and I will look to the questions. I need to confer with my colleagues, but by the same token, I saw that some things came up on negotiations. There isn't anything we could talk about on the negotiations until they have concluded. And if there's anything else that's, because I haven't seen the chat, that any one of the speakers has already noticed that they want to jump into, or that I could try to address, then I'm very happy to do so.
All right, so there may be one question that may be directed to Martin Penny. We got two of them actually. So about the Canadian government department's eligibility to participate in any EU programs. So I don't know if Martin, you can answer this one.
Sure. I mean, I think this depends on interest. Any legal entity is eligible to participate. So there is no restriction in terms of type of legal entity. So it can be a university, a company, an SME, a government department, a local authority. There are opportunities for all. Of course, because this is a research and innovation program, there may be more opportunities for companies, for SMEs, for universities and research institutes than there are for government departments, but any type of legal entity can apply.
Perfect, thank you. Anything else? Anything else that's been outstanding or?
Well, many questions were answered by participants during the webinar as well.
So then we're good. Okay, so then with that, the warmest thank you to you all, to the participants for your undivided attention, and to those that presented along with me. I sincerely appreciate the time and the efforts that you took to be able to compile the information and share this with us all. So with that, I wish you all a very good morning and or afternoon, and look forward to future correspondence on anything else that we can do to help you with your future success. Thank you and goodbye.